The Marnie and Steven rival battle decks are out now on Pokemon TCG Live, and they should be in stores now, supply varying from store to store. Of course, I understand that these are very hot products and they could be hard to come by, but from the information I'm aware of, these physical decks should be out now. And I think they are awesome, and not just because they have awesome illustration rare promos in them. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I just wanted to share some thoughts on why I think these rival battle decks are so good and have succeeded in ways that other recent Pokemon TCG pre-constructed decks have not. All of Pokemon's pre-constructed decks are ranked on a 3-level scale. Level 1 are beginner level decks, level 3 are advanced level decks, and then level 2 are somewhere in the middle. As someone who's been playing the Pokemon trading card game for a number of years now, and as someone who has bought pre-constructed decks, like I have the Lucario deck right here, and I have a Charizard League Battle deck here. I actually have this already built, but I still bought the League Battle deck because I thought this was an awesome value, and I will crack this open and build it up someday. But there is another level that I did want to talk about here in terms of competitive viability for these decks. And level 1 decks, generally speaking, there's no point in upgrading these decks. These are great as tutorials for learning how to play the Pokemon trading card game, but there is no world where you would actually want to buy the upgrade cards for these because at their core, the archetype is just not strong enough. Meanwhile, for League Battle decks, yes, you could absolutely just take this out of the box and go play in a tournament and probably do okay. And you could upgrade a League Battle deck and have a good shot at winning a tournament, potentially even going for the World Championships. And then level 2 ideally would be somewhere in the middle. Based on my early interactions with level 2 decks, I always thought of it as a world where you're getting something that maybe not quite as strong as level 3, but if you want to put in the effort to grab the upgrade cards, you would get a solid deck. It's just going to take more work than a level 2 deck. So somewhere in the middle, you still could make it competitively viable, but you're going to have to buy more cards to make it work. As it currently stands, I think the level 1 and level 3 decks are great. Level 1 decks have always been just fine at being a great tutorial for the game, and then level 3 decks have been on fire and only getting better over time. Most recently, we got the Dragapult EX League Battle deck, which I think is the single greatest League Battle deck we've ever gotten, and it's absolutely phenomenal for players that want to play the game seriously. And before Dragapult, we had the Charizard League Battle deck, which was phenomenal. And we could even go back to the Mew VMAX League Battle deck, which a couple of months after the Mew VMAX League Battle deck came out, Mew VMAX won the World Championships, just further speaking to how awesome these League Battle decks can be. Of course, the League Battle deck for Mew VMAX did get upgrades, but you could have bought a Mew VMAX League Battle deck and upgraded it to be something that could literally win the World Championship. So I think that the level 1 decks and the level 3 decks have been great. Level 2 decks used to be great. They did kind of fit that spot where there were really solid archetypes that would require a bit more work, but they would be very strong. The Rapid Strike Urshifu deck is one of the first League Battle decks I ever bought, and that is one where with some upgrades it was one of the best decks of the Sword and Shield era. Single Strike Urshifu was not as good as Rapid Strike Urshifu, but there was a time where Single Strike Urshifu was meta relevant. And Inteleon VMAX was my first ever League Battle deck, and it was not as strong as the other two, but Inteleon was an okay attacker, and it also had the Shady Dealings support line, which was one of the best support engines to ever exist in the Pokemon trading card game. So even though you didn't get the best deck in the world in a level 2 battle deck, these were awesome out of the box, and with some upgrades you were getting some of the best decks in the game. Unfortunately, when we switched over to the Scarlet and Violet era, the level 2 decks got considerably worse. And they did change the name to Deluxe Battle Deck because we didn't want to have League Battle decks as 2 different play levels, but also having the same name. So I'm fine with the name change to Deluxe Battle Deck to create separation between what a level 2 deck is and what a level 3 deck is. But I think they separated a little too hard. One of the things they changed was that we only got 3 holo foil cards instead of 4, and arguably this was an okay change because in the Sword and Shield era we had V and V Max cards, and in the Scarlet and Violet era we had EXs, and they just don't work the same, and they don't necessarily need as many holo foil cards as the other archetypes. But it does make for these decks to potentially be a little worse. But the big problem here is that the archetypes that they chose are considerably worse than what was chosen for Sword and Shield. The Scarlet and Violet era of deluxe battle decks started with Meowscarada and Quaquaval, and unfortunately Meowscarada is just not the strongest archetype. It's a card that's always had potential, but it's always fallen short. We've only seen this card appear in a day 2 one time across all of the tournaments in its existence, and we haven't seen much from it since. Furthermore, the actual list that we got in this Meowscarada Deluxe Battle deck is just pretty poorly built. We are missing a lot of pieces that make this deck function smoothly, from Rare Candy to Arven. There's no double turbo energy, which actually makes it really hard to even get Meowscarada to get powered up and fight in the first place, making it really tough to play out of the box. And even if you did go out of your way to get the rare candies, maybe you put Arceus V-Star in there and all the other cards, it's still not that great of a deck. At the very least, not even on the level of the Inteleon or Urshifu decks of the past. The Quaquaval deck is arguably built better than the Meowscarada, but Quaquaval EX is an even worse Pokemon than Meowscarada. We have seen basically 0 competitive connotations for Quaquaval EX, and I would not hold my breath on seeing Quaquaval do anything in the future. I do like the fact that this deck does come with Radiant Greninja, and it has some rare candy, and even has some energy acceleration with Baxcalibur, but it doesn't have enough of the pieces that you need to actually make this deck function, especially since you need multiple stage 2 Pokemon set up in order for it to really do anything. And with only 2 rare candies in here, having to set up multiple Quaquavals and Baxcaliburs, like, it's just stretched too thin. From there, we got Zapdos and Ninetales. And Zapdos was such an odd choice because it featured Miraidon EX, which we already had a Miraidon League battle deck, and this is just a worse Miraidon League battle deck. And the problem here is that Zapdos EX is not a focal point for a deck. At best, this is a Pokemon that you put one of in your Miraidon deck, and that's it. But trying to build an entire offense or strategy around the Zapdos just feels really bad, because Zapdos is not doing a lot of damage to the active and arguably not doing enough damage to the bench relative to how hard it is to get energy on the board and keep it on the board with Zapdos. Even if it was redundant, Miraidon was a nice inclusion, but the Pawmot line was not great. It's clogged with supporters that nobody plays, like Rhyme and Youngster, and the most frustrating part of this whole thing is that we don't even get 4 copies of Electric Generator, which is the primary way we would have powered up Zapdos and Miraidon here, and they could have very easily just put in a 4th generator, and for some reason we got stiffed on that. Ninetales was even worse than Zapdos in the sense that there was no reason to play Ninetales at a competitive level. If you wanted to play this casually with your friends, fine, I guess, but even then, this is a tough deck to play because its main attack requires you to have the exact amount of cards as your opponent, and that's just really hard to do with any sort of consistency, making Ninetales a really bad attacker. It doesn't help that the deck didn't come with any fire acceleration. It really would have helped to have Magma Basin in here just to more consistently build up our attackers, but we don't have any of that here, making it very difficult to actually set up our attackers. And then we also got shortchanged on cards that could help us match our opponent's hand size. Like, we could have had 4 copies of Judge. We could have even had Iono in here to help us out. And the deck, unfortunately, doesn't have enough or any of those at all. In the case of Iono, we got no copies of Iono here. Maybe the most disappointing of the deluxe battle decks are Miraidon and Koraidon. Like, building these decks on the ancient and future archetypes made a lot of sense, but these were the wrong Pokemon. Miraidon EX has seen basically zero play, this version of it, the future one. And then Iron Valiant isn't an attacker, but it's set up to be an attacker here. It's mostly just used as a way of pinging damage counters with that Tachyon Bits ability, but this deck is not really built for that at all. While I do like the inclusion of the single prize Miraidon, 4 copies of it is too much, and it just stings to know that we could have gotten Iron Hands in the spot. We could have gotten Iron Thorns in the spot. There are better future Pokemon that could have been here, and we got none of them, and instead we just got this really janky deck that doesn't play very well out of the box and doesn't have much in the way of a competitive future. Last but not least is Koraidon, which I actually like a bit more than the Miraidon deck, but the squandered potential here is even worse than the Miraidon one, because Ancient has some really great archetypes that they could have built upon, whether it was a Raging Bolt deck, a Roaring Moon deck, maybe an Ancient Box deck. And by building the deck around Koraidon EX and Sandy Shocks EX, you can't really do any of those competitive archetypes with this as a foundation. Level 2 battle decks in the Scarlet and Violet era have been really disappointing up until the launch of these rival battle decks. I'm a big fan of what Pokemon did here. And again, I'm not saying that these are necessarily better than the League battle decks, but for the purposes of being that mid-range intermediate level deck, I think these are fantastic. And one of the big adjustments here that they've made is that the Pokemon that are featured are better. And I don't necessarily mean in the promo cards. The promo cards are amazing, but the primary attackers and energy acceleration, these Pokemon are great. Grimmsnarl EX is so good because it only takes 2 energy to power up Shadow Bullet, and on top of that, that Punk Up ability is incredible. When you evolve up to Grimmsnarl, you get to accelerate 5 energy to your Marnie's Pokemon, letting you power up pretty much all of the attackers you need for the rest of the game. Metagross is a little harder to power up in the sense that its attack cost is 3 instead of 2 on Grimmsnarl, but it's not that hard to power this up either, as X-Boot as an ability is amazing, allowing you to accelerate a Metal and Psychic energy to one of your Metal or Psychic Pokemon. So you can just very easily power up Metagross or any other attacker in this deck in 1 turn. Besides those feature Pokemon, I think just the lists overall are way better built out of the box and better set up for competitive play. Out of the box, the Marnie deck list is not the most competitive, but it has a lot of strong foundational pieces here. We do get that 4-3-2 line of the Grimmsnarl, and I like the trainer lineup a lot. 4 copies of Professor's Research, letting you discard your hand, draw 7. Drayton is not necessarily the most meta-relevant trainer card here, but I do like it in the sense that it does make setting up Grimmsnarl a little easier. I love the fact that it has 3 copies of Rare Candy in here. I love the fact that we get the Spikemuth Stadium, allowing you to grab a Marnie's Pokemon from your deck and put that into your hand. All of that together make it way easier to set up your Grimmsnarl than it is to set up most of the other Pokemon in any of the other deluxe battle decks we've seen thus far, making this a much smoother play out of the box. Similarly, Steven's deck list also benefits from a better selection of trainer cards. I love the fact that we get multiple copies of Rare Candy here, as well as Drayton. While it's not necessarily the most meta-relevant trainer card, it does fit within the context of this list, making it easier to set up Metagross. And I think out of the box, if you're playing against another deluxe battle deck, the Steven's deck list is going to perform admirably. Quite frankly, in a head-to-head, I think that the Marnie deck and the Steven deck absolutely crush the other deluxe battle decks in a battle. Best of all is that if you really wanted to go all out with your Marnie deck, you absolutely can, as Grimmsnarl EX has shaped up to be one of the best decks in competitive play. And yes, you're going to have to put in some time and effort to get the cards, but if you're willing to do it, you can use this rival battle deck as the foundation for one of the strongest decks at the time of this recording. Over in Japan, where they've had destined rivals for some time now, Grimmsnarl is currently sitting in S tier as one of the strongest decks in the game, And at one of the most recent major tournaments, this is the results from Champions League Aichi, where there were 5,000 players there. 4 of the top 16 decks were Grimmsnarl decks. And here's a look at the 5th place list from Haru Nishikawa. And there's definitely some changes here in terms of having an extra Grimmsnarl, and then we're including other Pokemon like a Munkidori, Frostlass, and so on. But we do have that rival battle deck as a starting point to ultimately build towards something like this. And it's worth building towards something like this because at the time of this recording, this deck has proven to be incredibly strong in the competitive meta. And that's something that I absolutely love, being able to buy that pre-constructed deck and have the potential to build towards something that can compete at this level. While I do think many people are going to buy these rival battle decks just to get a hold of the promo Morpeko and Beldum, I think these decks are a really great value for anyone looking to play the game. Again, against the other deluxe battle decks that we have seen in the Scarlet and Violet era, I think these ones are way more playable. And the Marnie deck in particular, if you're willing to go out of your way to get those upgrade cards, you could potentially build one of the best decks in the game, and one that I've actually had a ton of fun playing myself. Now, at the time of this recording, I haven't been able to get a pre-order in for either of these rival battle decks, but I do hope to get one someday, and I hope you're able to get one as well if you are interested in picking them up. But regardless, I do want to send my kudos to Pokemon for really hitting these decks out of the park in terms of their playability relative to the play level system, because I really feel like the level 2 decks kind of lost their way in the Scarlet and Violet era. And going forward, whether they keep the rival battle branding or not, I hope that these decks are built in this way where they're pretty strong out of the box, and if you're willing to upgrade them, you are going to get something that has the potential to be awesome. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I gotta get out of here though. Before we go, you can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website InThirdPerson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.